Welcome to Global Tax Talk. I'm Will Morris. I'm delighted to be joined today by Renate Lange, who is our Global Sustainability Leader for TLS at PwC and a member of our Dutch firm. Renate, welcome.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Good. Okay, so let's dive into tax policy and sustainability. So what is driving the introduction of these new sustainability regulations?
I think that is a really good question, because a lot of our clients wonder, why is this all happening?
Right.
And I think if you think of what's happening in the world and the massive disruption we are facing as a world, but also a lot of our clients, a lot of industries, a lot of sectors caused by the impact of climate change.
Right.
You can think of, for example, the physical risks to your asset. Look at what happened with real estate in several places in the world by wildfires, by flooding. So the cost of that, but also the disruption of supply chain. So when there's wind, there will be no planes on that day. So that has a massive impact. And I think at the same time, also the impact of climate change, heavy weather events, for example, on scarce resources. That has a massive disruption on our economies.
Mm-hmm.
And I think if you talk to a lot of organization clients, they still perceive it as a midterm or perhaps even sometimes a long-term risk, specifically in those parts of the world where it's not so obvious that it's becoming warmer or it's becoming more rainy. But that regulation, which you see coming in a lot of places in the world, basically tries to do is make a short-term issue for a midterm risk.
Right.
And what you see happening is that they basically say, okay, in order to avoid that we don't have specific resource in 5, 10, 20 years anymore, we are going to demotivate the use of that resource by just putting all kind of regulation by taxing it, or just say you're not allowed to, or you should do more.
Right.
And I think the better you understand that, it's easier to also use that regulation as an opportunity to better steer your own business, because it might be a prediction for what's coming to you.
Sure. Good. That's a great answer. So anyway, given the sort of moving up a level, given the sort of current geopolitical uncertainties, do we think many of these current sustainability regs will be scaled back or removed?
Yeah, so that's a question I got often asked by a lot of people. And to be honest, I don't know exactly. But what I expect, and that's also what you see happening nowadays, is on the one hand, I think that some of the regulations will be pulled back or mitigated. So what you see, I think in the US, you see some interventions already. Okay, we're going to take out a few of the incentives we put in place, or we're going to take out some of the reporting regulations we put in place. In the EU, there's a strong pressure to mitigate the administrative burden. But at the same time, you also see a tendency for economies to protect their economy.
Right.
So protect economies for getting lack of resources, to protect economies to accelerate the energy transition, become less dependent on few resources, also old resources. And what you will see is that they will put in more and more regulation, which is targeted to achieve what people or organizations or governments want to achieve.
Right.
So I think some will be pulled back, and some will be introduced, but really focus on what do we want to achieve and what's the best regulation to support that ambition.
Right. Can I ask a follow-up question to that? Because obviously, for tax people, a lot of tax people look at these regulations and think, well, those aren't about tax. So very quick question, but sort of two small parts of it. The first is actually how much is already about tax? And secondly, how do you see that part developing?
Yeah, so that's also a good question. I think you see the same reflected within clients indeed. So that's what you see. And I think that's also the challenge at the same time. A lot of this regulation is picked up quite fragmented within organizations. So when you talk about reporting, and it started perhaps all in the office of the Chief Sustainability Officer. And when that reporting became part of the financial statements, it moved into the office of the CFO. When there's tax in a regulation, it's often pushed to the head of tax. When there's something on supply chain, it's given to the CEO. And when there's a legal in or something, they put it to the head of legal or the legal counsel. But I think what's good to realize is that whether you take one regulation like tariffs or plastic taxes, or you take regulation on your supply chain by do you understand what's happening and can you show something on your product coding and the details of the sourcing of your goods, you can't do one without understanding the other. So this is not only about tax. This is basically for every functional area within the C-suite. But I think tax people and the tax function together with the CFO or the financing function is so well positioned to connect those dots across the different areas in the organization.
So let me ask a natural follow-up question to that: is how does the landscape develop over the next 3 to 5 years?
That's also really interesting. What you see already happening, I think, is that if you look at the big clusters in the world, they are responding to what's happening in another cluster. So again, if I, for example, focus now a bit on EU, which is, I think, the most dominant region when it comes to sustainability regulation, I think what you see happening there now is that they basically said, okay, we try to mitigate the administrative burden and we move really to what I call substance over form.
Yep.
So much more regulation, which really drives the transition. Mm-hmm. And that transition is also focusing on a few ambitions to really make that green economy, but also to protect the economy to become much more autonomous, much more resilient, much more competitive. Yep. And basically do whatever it takes to achieve that. And that will be a myriad of regulations, of taxes, incentives, and a lot of directives which will say to organizations, you should or you should not allow to. Very industry specific, very sector specific even, I think. And that also shows off the complexity of that landscape which is coming to us. Because a lot of our organization clients are not only EU clients, but they have a global footprint. So they, at the same time, they also need to anticipate what's happening in other parts of the world.
So, quick, maybe final question: what advice are you giving to clients at the moment?
So what I would really would advise is don't think this is going away. I think that's the best advice. This is not going away. Climate risk is not going away, and regulation will be there and stay there to basically mitigate those risks and help you to accelerate the transition. So really try to understand which regulation is coming to you, where you are in scope, but also which one have the most material impact. Yeah. So where should you focus first? You can't fix everything overnight, but also take that regulation as perhaps a steer for your own strategy, because I think it might be a predictor of your future climate issue.
Renate, thank you so much for joining us. And clear message, sustainability is not going away. Pay attention.
Thank you.
Good. Anyway, again, thank you for joining us, and thank you all for joining us as well. And come back next time so that you stay global tax ready.